And I'm Shannon Mackay. I'm the Senior Project Manager for Development Planning Urban Team. I am the host of this meeting, however, Vince will be the chair. Just a couple of quick notes as we get started here. In addition to the panel members, we have the applicant team, city staff, members of the public, and media observing the meeting. This session is being recorded and will be uploaded to the DRP webpage. Just a reminder to keep your microphones muted if you're not speaking, just to avoid any background noise. And with that, Vince, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Can you confirm this session is being recorded?
I can, yes.
Thank you. Any changes to the agenda today, Shannon?
Not today, no.
Okay, great. Any declarations of interest on the panel members? Okay, I don't hear any. So our item today is a residential development located at 16 Cannon Street East. Lead planner on the file is Mark Keller, but Sean Stewart will be presenting on his behalf. Good afternoon, Sean. We're ready for your presentation. Please keep the presentation under 10 minutes. Thanks. Sean there?
John? Sean, we're having trouble hearing you. Just want to make sure you're there.
Can you hear me? Sorry, can you hear me now, Shannon?
Yes.
Good? Okay, sorry, everybody. Okay, and you can see the screen okay, right?
Yeah, you're good to go.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. We'll be talking, I'm presenting on behalf of Mark Keller, staff presentation for 16 Cannon Street East. The applicant is proposing to construct a 16-story multiple dwelling with 134 units and 37 parking spaces. The property location is on the south side of Cannon Street West, between Houston Street North and James Street North. This is an image of the property looking south, a view of the existing development to the west, a view of the existing development to the east, and from the northwest, and a view of the existing development to the northeast. This image shows the site plan, proposed site plan, Cannon Street on the northeast, Cannon Street on the north side of the drawing. This is a front elevation of the proposed building. Policy environment. On Schedule E of the Urban Hamilton Official Plan, the property is located within the Downtown Urban Growth Center. On Schedule E1, it's located within the Downtown Mixed Use Area. Some major policy themes: the Downtown Urban Growth Center shall be the preeminent node in Hamilton due to its scale, density, range of uses, function, and identity. Shall be planned for a range of uses appropriate to its role as the city's preeminent node. It shall function as a residential neighborhood with large and diverse population and a range of housing types. In the downtown mixed-use area, shall serve as the central focus for the city by creating a sense of place. A higher density form of housing shall be encouraged that may be integrated with business uses, including retail and service commercial establishments on the ground floor. Some key urban design policies, respecting existing character, development patterns, built form, and landscapes, promoting quality design consistent with the locale and surrounding environment, contributing to the character and ambience of the community through appropriate design of streetscapes and amenity areas, massing development to respect existing and planned street proportions, designing new development to minimize impact on neighboring buildings, and creating a comfortable pedestrian environment. The property is also located within the Downtown Hamilton Secondary Plan, within the Downtown Mixed Use designation. It's also within the mid-rise category. Some major policy themes here is the downtown mixed use, supports intensive urban scale mixed use development. Mid-rise buildings include anything greater than 6 stories, but not greater than 12 stories in height. Buildings shall be designed to address the street with active frontages and principal entrances facing the public realm. Mid-rise buildings shall create effective transition to existing or future tall buildings through the use of appropriate setbacks and stepbacks. And buildings shall be designed to frame the street they are fronting while providing sun access to adjacent properties through considering building orientation, stepbacks, angular plane, and the relationship to adjacent land uses. Some key urban design themes. Development shall provide for transition and scale through a variety of design methods, including angular planes, location and orientation of buildings, and setbacks and stepbacks of building mass. Development shall allow for a minimum of 3 hours of sun coverage between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. as measured on March 21st and September 21st on public sidewalks and other amenity areas. New development shall be compatible with on-site and adjacent cultural heritage resources. Adaptive reuse will be given priority for all built heritage resources. And all development shall be massed to frame streets in a way that respects adjacent street proportions. It's the map of the zoning map of the property. It's within the downtown central business district D1 zone. Some regulations to note: maximum building height 44 meters, maximum lot coverage 85%, building base facade height 22 meters along Cannon Street East, minimum 3 meter step back above the building base facade height, and a minimum 3 meter step back for any portion of the building exceeding 22 meters from any side or rear lot line. So some specific areas of discussion that staff would appreciate some consideration of. Does the proposal complement the existing massing patterns, rhythm, character, color, and surrounding context? Does the proposal define the street through consistent setbacks and building elevations? And does the proposal conserve and respect the existing built heritage features of the area? Thank you.
The applicant to present their proposal. Please keep the presentation under 10 minutes. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ali Chafai, partner in Architect. I'm here with my partner, Dr. Riagat, and we want to present our project in 16 Cannon East. Just the location and preliminary discussion about the location of the building, because we had all of those information from the previous presentation. I just go directly to the plan. So the first image we have is here shows the pedestrian and vehicle access to the site and from site to the street. As you see, we have the entrance from Cannon Street, and we have access to the building from west side of the lobby. I have to go back to this image. As you see, the first image, we have image number 3, shows the existing building with the brick portion of that, which is a valuable wall or elevation, which we try to work around it and use it in our design. I believe this is in this building is a heritage inventory of the city of Hamilton, and it has some really value of the previous design. In our project, we try to keep it as our advantage and look the building similar to what we had in the past, and also to have a better project. So because of the reason I mentioned to you, we try not to change the entrance to the building, so we change the direction, the access to the lobby from west side of the project. Projects include 37 parking spots. 33 of them are stackers, which we used in this project. This drawing shows the P2 levels, showing mechanical room, some electrical room, some bike storage, and the bottom portion of the stackers. And there's also a lobby and an elevator lobby access, providing access to other floors. Going back to level 1, the cars enter to the parking area and using the elevator in west southwest corner to go to P1 level, which in this level, the real parking area starts. We have stackers start from this level, so people, cars using the car elevator could come to this level, use the stackers, park their cars, take to the elevator lobby, and go to their levels. In ground floor, we have a lobby, as I mentioned. The entrance to the lobby is from west side. We try again keep the existing elevation intact and have vestibule and the room in this lobby area. In this level, we also have 4 regular parking spaces which we have includes 1 barrier free, which provide a real easy access for people on wheelchair and people in the other elements of in this room. Just transformer room, which we hide it in the back of the building, garbage room, and car elevator, as I mentioned before. And we have also a bike storage for visitors in entrance. Second floors include the amenity space, which can be part of sort of party room, probably a library. We haven't decided to final elements of this party room, but the next step provide more information about this. And as I mentioned, party room is one of the elements for sure. And in this level, we have some spaces open to below, a small management office and 3 units. From 3rd floor, we have the main residential unit levels that starts. You can see the units march around the hallway. It's very efficient building, and we try to work with site. One of the things we try to keep the setbacks as 3 meters are all around the building, but in west side we have a little bit less setback, but in other sides we try to maintain the setbacks. We also in north side where we have the heritage. I know this is not still registered as heritage, but for ease of work, or let me call it heritage wall. So for emphasize on that one, in 3rd floor, we had a setback from above the heritage wall. 4th floor, we have again residential units going all the way to 16th floor. And in roof area, we have mechanical penthouse. We have a small amenity space which serve the outdoor amenity, which we provided for the residents of the building, including a green roof area. This green roof can also help on the sustainability of the project. I think the main portion of our design and discussion on our design is talking about, again, heritage wall, which we have. The podium is just line up with this. We use the same material. We don't want to mimic the exact what's there, but we try to, use the same colors and the same material to, just have a great podium for this project. In level 3, we have a glass portion which acts as a reveal between the podium and the tower portion of the building. We intend to use the tinted glass in this level to have more emphasis on the separation between podium and the tower portion. The other design tricks we use is just using lighter material and above the heritage portion. If I go to this image, you can see how we use even more reflection for the glasses in this area, which makes a little bit light building above the heritage portion. This is, in our opinion, this helps to emphasize on the heritage building and make it a separation between two portions of the buildings. For the rest of the buildings, we use the window wall system plus some metal panel system with playing with the patterns. These metal panels also help us to provide, reduce the size of the glass in elevations and have a better R value in the envelope system, which again helps us for the sustainability of the project. The rest is just, I'm sure everybody reviewed the drawings, and if there's a question, we can go back to answer the questions. And plus, this image shows the building from looking west from Cannon Street. The next image is from Cannon, same street, but in this image we're looking at east. And we provided shadow studies for this project as per City of Hamilton standards, and I believe we covered everything in 10 minutes. If there's any question and comments, by all means.
Vince, are you there?
Yes, sorry. Thank you. It was a good presentation. Listen, at this time, we'll ask each panel member now to ask some questions. And we'll start with Robert.
Thanks. The presentation, that was very helpful. First question is, since you had the shadow study up there a second ago, and I heard in the first presentation, I believe it's a requirement for three hours of sunlight on the surrounding sidewalks. Do those shadow studies show that in fact has been met?
Do I share again my screen? Okay, so this is June 21st, Robert. I believe you are asking about the shadow on Cannon Street.
Yes.
So as you see in the project, the building is right to the property line, and we will have shadow on the street. It's not for sure. We will have some shadow on the street, and one portion of that, is the west portion of the building has a little setback from the street, but still we provide shadow on the street. There is no. As you see, the site is very tight side, and we have to work with that.
Okay, and then the second question just has to do with the timing of your application in relation to the city's tall building design guidelines. Was this before or after those guidelines came into effect?
Franz, can you help us on this one?
The tall building guidelines on this particular property were in force and effect prior to the submission of this application to the DRP.
Okay, thanks.
Is that it, Robert?
Yeah, that's for my question.
Great. Okay. So Yuta.
My question is more related to the space between the proposed building and the existing building. Can you just walk us a little bit more through? Is it open? The space is open for pedestrian circulation. Is it what's the relation with the surrounding kind of an involving envelope of buildings surrounding you, and how the setbacks between buildings and windows is really kind of making it the rationale and into how you separate the different buildings.
So at first floor, we have a little bit less space between our buildings and existing building.
Yeah.
If I go back to all the way to the survey drawing, you can see the south building is built right on the property line.
Yeah.
So in first floor, we just provided space enough for exiting and also provide the function. In reality, nobody's supposed to use that space during the regular hours. Just we have 2 exits for this area, for the back. We use this area. In this level, in first floor, the building stops at lower than window of the existing building. And after second floor, we have 3 meter setbacks all around the buildings and 2.5 meter on this building. And we kept these 3 meters all the way to the last floor. So there's always 3 meters space between our building and the neighboring building. And in second floor, even if we have just some sort of truss, again, this is inaccessible truss. Nobody can use it. Always that 3 meter thing doesn't change. In other levels, that 3 meters also kept the 3 meters from our property line.
So I just want to clarify the one comment there from Aliuta. On the ground floor, the highest point of the elevation of that first floor is below any windowsill elevation on the neighboring building to the south. So we're not walling up any windows if that's what you are concerned about. And we are providing 1.2 meter setback all around to the ground floor of the building of that first floor.
Okay, great.
So we're well within the confines of the zoning bylaw, I believe, with those requirements, with the exception of the 2.5 meter setback toward the western portion of the rear property line.
And currently, there is no action out of that existing building off Cannon Street, right? It's more on Hoxton Street, or on the, I guess it will be the Hamilton is all the way around, different from Toronto. It will be on the easterly side. There's no, you don't need to provide any further access for that building from the north side.
No. And just I have to also emphasize the existing situation in this area. We have the existing building is all, even in our property, is going all the way to the property line, which we have
the existing building there today butts up against the property to the south.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, James.
Thank you, Vince, and thank you very much for the presentation. Great to see a really interesting and innovative building being proposed on this section of Cannon Street. I guess my first question is, through the initial review of the project, has it been confirmed if the city is seeking any road widenings off Cannon Street? Because there seems to be a bit of a disjointed street line here.
Yeah, I can speak to that, Ellie. Nice to hear from you, James. There is typically a 3 meter widening that is required along Cannon Street. And you can see it looks almost as though a portion of that has already been taken off the western portion of the frontage. Because we are dealing with a facade that is identified on the inventory, my client has elected to maintain that historical facade and include it within the final and ultimate design, which would preclude the opportunity for any further road widenings.
Okay, thank you for that.
No problem.
Specific to the facade, then, I've read the heritage impact assessment. It seems to be that all that is being retained is the skin of that facade. There's no other portion of the building. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
So I guess the question to the designers is, help me understand sort of the design rationale for the lower stories of this building, what essentially is that skin that you're retaining and that podium, sorry. You know, help me understand how that makes, you know, a positive contribution to the streetscape. Here's that you've retained that skin, but you've then got a recess immediately above it, and it's hard to tell if that's a 1 or 2 story building height. So just, again, more to your design philosophy, how this has evolved. Help us understand how you've developed the podium portion of the building transitions to the upper stories.
So, as I mentioned, we have a podium, and we have to make a separation between podium from top. And to emphasize on that podium portion, we had small setback in third floor, and we separated the tower with the podium portion with the glass portion. I think that's the whole reason to just keep the character of the existing building, and even when we add something new to that, so it's not some sort of compatible with each other. At the same time, we don't want to jeopardize the existing facade. I'm not sure if answered your question, or if you have more clarification.
I guess I'm just trying to understand the transition, because you're retaining the skin on the left-hand side. To the right or to the west towards Upper James Street, you're trying to replicate at least the materiality in the window. So when I read the Heritage Impact Assessment, it says emphasis shall be given to try to replicate at least a 2 to 3 story podium that respects in part that existing the skin of what's being retained of the existing building. So help me understand that transition as it relates to adding that full level of glass immediately above that. I mean, do you see that as part of the podium, or is that the immediate transition to the building?
The glass is, as I told you, is just separation. It's not the podium. It's transition between those two sections of the building.
Okay, Vince, those are my questions.
Okay, Jackie?
Yeah, I'm curious about the parking, and you know, the main entrance drive doesn't line up with the elevator for one, and then I'm looking at the handicap spot and needing to back out of there. Has this gone? Have you included a review from a traffic engineer?
We involve traffic engineer. Recently, our work on the impact parking at the same time. And hopefully with the next submission, we will resolve all of those issues.
So, so just to expand on that, Jackie, we have placed all of the turning positions on auto turn with our with our traffic consultant, and we do meet all turning radius requirements for what is proposed here before you.
Okay, thank you. That's all, Vince.
Yasin, sorry.
Yep, thank you. Could you, Franz, you spoke, no, so maybe it wasn't Franz, it was the planning lead from the city. There was a lot of talk about just the context and the policy around the whole block. And I was just wondering, during the design process, could you talk about how you envision the rest of the block developing? Because you have some very tight conditions around the back of your site, and I'm trying to understand what the condition of other buildings are around you to even start construction of something like this before anything is resolved with these other buildings. So when I say the other buildings, I'm talking about the that warehouse building that's just on, sorry, it's trying to see what street it's on.
It's on Houston Street.
Yeah. So on some of the photographs that were being shown, I saw that the windows were blown out. So is that basically an empty building at the moment? And Can anybody from your side or the city side speak to what's coming up on that? Because
I can.
yeah.
Yeah, I can speak to that.
Go ahead.
To make it clear to you, Yasin, the building fronting onto Houston Street at 127 Houston is the former Firth Brothers manufacturing facility. That is now just recently, within the last, I believe, month or two, maybe longer than that ago, but very recently has now been protected under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. And that's the entire building, as far as I'm understanding, that it wraps around us on the south. To the immediate east at the corner of Houston and Cannon, we have a very small piece of property that is approximately, if I remember correctly, about 14 to 18 meters in depth across the entire frontage along Cannon Street there, which is a fairly small portion of property that is being used as a parking lot for 127 Houston. Mm-hmm. Immediately to our west, where the Burnt Tongue restaurant is, that's the building immediately to our west, that is on the heritage inventory currently. And then the buildings beyond that to the west that front onto James Street are actually on the Municipal Heritage Registry at this point. So the likelihood that the properties surrounding the subject lands are to be developed in the future are slim. I'm not saying they're impossible, but it's very unlikely that there would be the feasibility to develop those other properties in the future.
Okay, so that means that this will be but theoretically what you're stating is that there will be no other tall structure around this building other than this at this height. Is that correct?
That's certainly possible, but we'd have to see how things unfold in the
future. That's how you proceeded, right? Theoretically.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. So what we're seeing as the context is the context, and this is the massing of the building in relation to that. Okay. Can I just ask also, just in regards to the parking sequence and the location of the elevator, was there ever an option where the elevator could have been located inboard where the garbage area is? It's kind of in a very awkward location where it seems to impact on the type of units you have at the front.
That's a possibility, and it had a look at that. It had some impact on the number of the parkings.
Okay.
But we will double check that one, and I understand about your point.
Okay. And are all your units, are there any double height units at the top, or are they all single floor units? Because your elevations imply double height.
No, everything is single story. You don't have double. The top portion is just mechanical room.
Right.
And a small amenity portion in the corner.
Okay. And lastly, is there an amenity space on one of the floors? I don't see it on the.
In second floor, we have an amenity in this area.
Okay.
And in the roof, we have a small amenity, indoor amenity, which serves the outdoor amenity we have at the roof.
Okay. And then lastly, could you just explain your material strategy in terms of the kind of materials you're planning to use and how you thought about the materials in terms of the surroundings and in terms of the composition and the design? So the external materials of the.
Yeah, the material, as we discussed in base for parking, is just brick, and it will be matched with the facade, the existing facade. The rest of the building will be window wall system with metal panel system, combination of both of them, and we try to make it completely different from podium to emphasize on the podium. and
Right.
relation, especially if we wanted to, just keep the character of the building and keep the character of the facade in our building.
Okay. Okay, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Yancy. Tim?
Thanks, Vince. Question, I guess, for Franz or Sean. I just want to be clear on the variances that are required for this development, specifically with respect to setbacks.
Yeah, certainly. So the variances that we're looking at, the first one would be for maximum lot coverage. We're going to need half a square meter increase in lot coverage from 85% to 85.5. Should say half a percentage, my apologies. On the north lot line against Cannon Street, we're required to provide a 2.6 meter setback above the 22 meter line. We're proposing 2.96 meters, so a very small variance for the front lot line where the original facade is, the historic facade. Will also require an additional variance only because the property jogs to the south as it goes west to provide a zero setback there. But I guess what we're looking at in terms of its relationship to the street line is that setback is in excess of 3 meters at that point when you think about what the actual line of the front of the property would be if it was against that front historic facade. With regard to the eastern property line, we're providing a 2.2 meter setback, whereas 3 meters is required above 22 meters. And then on the western lot line, we're providing a 2.13 meter setback at the front. And at the rear, it's a 1.49 meter setback, with 3 meters is required. Finally, we're going to have to look at this because I think we can resolve this matter. The parking stackers that we're proposing are proposed at 2.6 by 5.5 meters. We will need a variance to permit parking stackers, and that is the size that Close Parking manufactures these stackers at. So we would need a variance to permit a parking stacker and to permit a parking stall size that is standard to that parking stacker. So in total, that would be 4 to 5 variances depending on the interpretation.
Okay, no variance for common amenity space?
Nope. We're meeting that requirement, actually exceeding that requirement.
Okay, that's it for my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Okay, would you take the chair a sec, Tim, please?
Sure.
So in terms of the permitted height, where are you now relative to the permitted height?
We are we are at 43.99 meters in height, whereas 44 meters is permitted.
Okay. Does the road widening typically apply just to the base of a property, or does it apply to the full body of the building all the way up?
Do you mean
my question is that you're cantilevering or you're doing something over top of the heritage piece below, and it's like a 2.8 or 2.9 meter cantilever from the looks of it, because I don't see any columns holding that up, and I'm wondering, does it need to project that far, or can you just not meet the facade of the neighboring building, the adjoining building?
So I'm going to speak to the planning side of that to begin with in terms of the setback. At the front lot line, a zero setback is permitted. However, above 22 meters, which on this drawing is, I believe, the 8th or the 9th story, we're required to provide a 3 meter setback. The portion of the property, I guess this is a good example here in this drawing that Ali is showing. For the portion of the property to the right, which is the closest to Cannon Street, you'll notice that we are providing a 2.96 meter setback to that foremost portion of the property line. So 2.96 meters, we're talking 4 millimeters difference from what the requirement is in terms of a full setback. But then to the eastern portion of the western portion of the property where it jogs south, we are providing a 0 setback above 22 meters. And really, we think that's reasonable and supportable from the context of this site, meaning that the main portion of the building that we're setting back from is the portion that is closest to Cannon Street. That we then set back for the entire footprint of the building, the width of that property, which is, or the width of that portion of that jog, which is 2.63 meters in depth on the eastern portion. However, it is technically a 0 setback on the eastern portion.
Yeah, I guess this is directed to planning more than it is to yourselves, because if you have a 3-meter road widening and you have a heritage component that exceeds or extends into that road widening, in what way does it permit the building above to not have to meet the 3 meters from above the heritage component right at the beginning, like right at the outset? Like, how does the 3-meter road widening not? It's basically you're able to use that setback because it's an existing heritage building, but does it suggest that the body of the tower automatically gains those rights? Like, I understand what you're doing in the upper portion and all that good stuff. What I'm trying to get at is how does the base of the building, because I guess these are questions, not, anyway, where my difficulty is how the body of the massing of the building is meeting the top of the heritage. I know you stepped it back in on one floor, so you felt there was a need to provide a recess and some clearance above the heritage component. And I'm just wondering, under the bylaw, how a site that has a road widening requirement, the portion that encroaches in that road widening requirement is allowed to be maintained, but I didn't know that the building above gains those rights. I guess that's a question to planning, not to yourselves, but that's the point I'm trying to make, because where I'm having difficulty with this scheme is that the massing of the building in some way doesn't respect the heritage piece at the base as well as it could. And if you look at the portion of the building that's set back the full extent, it seems to have a better relationship to the base than the portion of the building that projects out towards Cannon Street. That's an observation more than it is a question, but I was just wondering that I didn't know that legally you gain the rights over road widening above the portion of the building that happens to be heritage, because otherwise you wouldn't have that right. If this was a road widening and this wasn't a heritage building, you'd have to meet the road widening setback. So
Well, I guess
it's a question for planning. It's not really a question for you, but
fair enough.
so anyway, because later on I'll make some comments about how the base of the heritage is somewhat it's having some difficulty with the upper body, but anyway. Now, in terms of your setbacks around the perimeter, I see a lot of glass. Did you do your limiting calculations on this? Limiting distance calculations? Because you've got a high percentage of glass with some very shallow setbacks.
We know that from the first day you will have this problem, so we will have to provide the sprinkler windows for this project.
Yeah, I didn't hear your answer. I'm sorry.
I'm saying we knew that this problem, and the answer had this discussion with our team, and the answer is just providing the window sprinkler for this project.
So you're providing a greater percentage of unprotected openings. Now you're going to protect them so that you can have the extent of glass that you're proposing.
Yes.
Okay.
And if you look at the drawing, the width of the units are that large, and so the area can just manage it with the sprinkler window.
Right. Okay. And what is the size of your floor plate?
The floor plate is, just give me 1 second. in upper portion of the building is something about 630 square meter.
That's the largest plate or the smallest plate?
Is largest.
The largest. Okay, that's all my questions. So we'll close the question and answer session and we'll open it up to panel advice. So we'll start with Robert.
Thanks, Vince. Again, thank you for the presentation. So my comments in some ways are going to be aimed, I'll try and direct this when they are aimed at the city. But let me open by saying that I think the view that's up on the screen right now is a good one. That in many ways, I find this a handsome building. I think it's been carefully thought out and conceived. And to put it somewhat in the abstract, if this were on a larger site, I think with a little bit of trimming and tucking, it could actually be quite a nice insertion into the area. Having said that, it's not on a larger site. It's on quite a small site. And, I can understand the approach that you've taken given how the site is zoned in terms of permitted overall height and setbacks. But I asked the question at the beginning whether the tall building guidelines were in place when this was conceived, and it's clear that this is not, that the guidelines have been completely ignored. But I'll come back to that in a second. So, just looking at this view, I think the approach to heritage is a good start. I do think it's a handsome facade, and it's certainly an old building that will contribute to the overall heritage character in the area. I think as a general rule, when preserving a facade like this, you've removed the upper portion, which again I can't recall the details whether that in fact was part of the heritage or not. But since it's a lower facade, I think when you place a tower over top of it, it tends to get overwhelmed and lost. So I think it'd be quite important to provide more recess and a taller recess. So even though it is just a facade that's being preserved, it gives much more of an appearance of a three-dimensional heritage building. And the tower recedes and defers heritage building. Which the street, I think, in the view here, it really looks like the heritage building is being crushed and overwhelmed by the tower. So that's with respect to the heritage. These next comments maybe are directed more to the city because. Again, the zoning seems to permit quite a large building and is quite out of step with what the direction of the tall building guidelines. In my opinion, this is a great mid-rise site, not a great tall building site. Just given its how constrained it is, its L shape, and the difficulty if you were to implement setbacks or step backs that come close to what the tall building guidelines recommend, you'd have a very tough time locating a viable tower. So having said that, I think as a mid-rise site, this could a bit of density and it would be a building of a form and height that would fit in with the context. There were some comments early on, I can't remember who made them, about the unlikelihood of tall buildings or other tall buildings being developed in the area because the other buildings are heritage protected. That there are certainly many examples in Ontario where heritage protected buildings have been, hours have been permitted on them and only aspects of them have been preserved. So I think that's a kind of dangerous assumption to make. And I think that the minimal setbacks that are being provided on this tower really crowd the site, and it is permitted to proceed as being proposed here. It's sort of a classic example of first to the post development that that this building would then kind of force the hand of all the neighbors if they would ever want to redevelop in the future. The result would be either you're going to get a terribly crowded condition with tall buildings that are facing each other much too closely, or the city would in fact force those to step back much more than the building is proposing to step back. So all of that to say, again, handsome building, well thought out, well designed zoning. But given the direction that the city is moving with respect to tall buildings, and the recommendation in the tall building guidelines that internal setbacks be in the range of 12.5 meters, this doesn't come anywhere close to that. In my mind, makes this a really good candidate for a mid-rise building, not a tall building. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Okay, Yuta.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Franz and Ali, for your presentation. I will second Robert's comments. If you were to apply the tall buildings guidelines to your specific building, you will end up with a complete different massing, and which may open the possibility of really start considering the potential to build a mid-rise building where the guidelines and the building performance standards that a high tall building call for are different, or of a different nature, and it will fit a little bit better into your overall surrounding context. I don't have any doubt that you have a wonderful way of working your facades, Ali. And after that, I think you can ensure that the transition from heritage to a more contemporary form, where you have a well-defined podium and a well-defined tower, can be achieved in any shape and form that you end up doing, whether it's mid-rise or high-rise. However, I think my whole issue is the setbacks. I do know that you comply, or you are asking for very, very little variance, but that doesn't mean that's good planning. And it is that the proximity with the windows of your surrounding context is just something that, even just the prospect of buying a unit that is barely 3 meters away from a future residential or office context with no visual break or visual way of mitigate that proximity, it seems a little bit relentless. And then once again, you're back to square one, where you either, if you're going tall, you start applying the tall buildings guidelines and see where you land, or you switch to a mid-rise building. But that's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Yuta. Okay, James.
Thank you, Vincent. Again, thank you for the presentation. It's a very interesting building. I'm sure it would make a valued contribution to the downtown streetscape, because the architecture is very interesting. There's components of it that I really do like. I think my comments are going to reflect a lot of what you just heard. I think that there's issues with respect to the overall size of the building and the manner in which you have crafted a facade through the retention of just the skin of that heritage building into a podium. I think that there's something missing. There's sort of a contradiction in your design approach to this. In preserving the facade, which admittedly is just the skin, I don't know that you've necessarily met the intent of the guidelines. You've found a flaw in the zoning bylaw and the secondary plan. And in doing so, you've now subjected yourselves to the tall building guidelines. That the downtown secondary plan calls this a mid-rise site and caps the maximum height as measured in stories, 12 stories. The zoning, on the other hand, allows you to go to 44 meters. So your design approach has been to try to maximize the amount of mass that you can get within that. And now you put yourself at 16 stories, 4 stories above, and therefore subject to those design guidelines. And I think personally where I'm struggling is just this element of retaining the heritage, which is certainly worthy of, it does make a valued contribution to the Cannon Street streetscape. But I think that you need to go back and even look very closely at what's in your heritage impact assessment, because that document, while it was encouraging the retention of that facade, it was very clear that you do it not just retaining that facade, but the design of the base. They had recommended a consistent 2-3 story building base to reflect the properties that are to the west. And if you read the document, they page after page after page are reflecting on the very significant and important heritage element of that James Street consistent 3-story street wall. So it almost feels as though it's self-serving. You're retaining only the skin of that building as a measure to having to avoid a road widening. So I think if you do want to do that, I think you need to expand and put greater priority design emphasis to that building base, and how can you otherwise incorporate that facade and maybe add more, it may be faux heritage or it may be some complementary design, but I think you really need to look at that building base in terms of its contribution to the existing streetscape, in terms of its scale, the consistent street wall, and other elements. Those are all my comments, Vince. Thank you.
Jackie?
I have no additional comments. Thanks, Vince.
Thank you. Yasin?
Yes, hello, thank you. So I echo everybody else's comments regarding the scale, the fact that I think is probably too high. It seems more appropriate as a mid-rise. I'm just on James's comments regarding the base. I'm just looking at the Google photographs, and I see that it's a fairly small building, strangely enough, the Heritage Building, and most of it above and behind it looks, well, again, it doesn't look worthy to me, but of course, heritage statements set the values. So I can see why you've done that, and secondly, the portion over the parking entrance, which mimics this brick facade, it may sound contradictory, but I feel like to respect the heritage character of this building, this section of the site, you don't need to replicate the material and then turn it into a parking garage, because that sort of, to me, diminishes the value of heritage, right? So if you're going to continue working on the site and continue working with heritage issues, I would focus the value on this existing building and not extend just the materiality and then turn it into something utilitarian like parking entry. I think you have to kind of rethink that approach and how you relate to the materiality of the heritage building. Just overall, I mean, personally, I think again, it's I think we all feel that we like the project. It just feels like it should be either on a different site, otherwise it should change in scale. It seems a little bit too large for this site, and that's why I think we have the mid-rise comments. I do echo, I think, what Robert had said, the way the massing kind of sits over the heritage. It looks like it's kind of squashing it in scale. So there's something in the proportionality of the volume that's just floating above the heritage, the one with the black frame, and just those kind of relationships, because I think everything else feels very well crafted and well proportioned, but then suddenly when it lands on the ground, its relationship to how it's relating to the heritage, and the way it lands to the ground is a little bit conflicted somehow. And so those are the kind of things I would look at. Again, I echo all the planning comments, the height comments, the limiting distance, and the relationship to surrounding buildings. It does just feel too tight for this site. But it's at the same time, it is a great design. So it looks. I hope you can resolve these issues, because you know, your team seems fully capable of crafting something quite beautiful on the site. So
Thank you, Yasin. Tim?
Yeah, thanks, Vince. I will also echo all my colleagues' comments. Yeah, this simply is not a big enough site for what you want to do on it. Unfortunately, it is really unfortunate that we have a real misalignment of policy, zoning, and guidelines here. But we're stuck with it. So, and this will be an issue with other sites. It already has been an issue of the sites. It's unfortunate, but we have to deal with it. And presumably you're not going to go away and come back with a mid-rise building. So I want to try and make my comments just a little bit pretty constructive. I want to just echo Yasin's comments about the brick piece west of the Heritage Building. I agree that that is, it will give more attention to the Heritage Building if you just have a contemporary treatment there and not try to extend that kind of brick facade over. There's no need to do that. So what can we do with an overly bulky building that's going to be really a landmark building in this area, which is wonderful from the developer's perspective, but from an urban design standpoint, this is not what's appropriate for this area. So how can we make, my question for me is, how can we make this just a more subtle building? I don't disagree that the facades are kind of well designed, but I don't agree that this is a good design for this site. If we were in the core of downtown where we anticipated, or there were many other buildings of this height or taller, this architecture would be perfectly fine. It would fit right in. But here, I mean, for you to be more respectful of the heritage with a mass like this, there needs to be a lot more subtlety. And so some strong suggestions are, for example, to recess all of the balconies to start with. I'll call it the black portion of the building, the black flame portion of the building, and that the black and white kind of approach is too distracting. I think we need something that just really emphasizes verticality, is just much more elegant. I don't want to kind of recommend, extensive glazing from a sustainability standpoint and a cost standpoint. That may not be smart. So maybe there's another approach where, in fact, there's even more brick in this building, and it is beyond the heritage component, being more respectful in terms of materiality with the context. That's obviously a very different approach. But if there are some refinements you can make to just make the facades much more subtle, and recognize that although this is not maybe an overly significant heritage building, that it needs a little bit more attention and to be standing out a bit more. And that is about, as others have discussed, about the setback, that kind of black framed element above it kind of popping out, kind of competing with that heritage piece. So that's the key thing, I think, for me. It's just an overdevelopment of the site, and it's just too, from an urban design standpoint, it's just terribly unfortunate. So I hope you'll consider our comments. I know the massing won't be able to be reduced much, but if we can just go more subtle with the architecture, I think we'll have something that we can all live with. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. If you don't mind taking the chair. I'm going to reiterate probably what I said earlier in the question period, but that projecting piece over the heritage is not working. I think your comment about neighboring sites not being able to redevelop is somewhat naive. I mean, any of those buildings can be taken down, any of those parking lots can be redeveloped, additional grades of parking be added to compensate for existing parking that maybe they're devoted to other properties, whatever. if you looked at your building in the future and you said, okay, the building next door had the same rights that you're trying to impose or take, well, it's an as of right, I suppose, to some extent, but that the buildings next door would only be a matter of, the same distance to your setback. And if they took on the same distance, your whole east and west facades would be rendered somewhat useless because they would have no daylight and they'd be so in close proximity to neighboring sites. The fact that you've got to sprinkler the entire end walls to be able to get glazing in automatically should give you a clue that it's overdeveloped. And the setback should be increased to provide a better building. And so I like the building, don't get me wrong. I like everyone's saying they like the building, it's just in the wrong place. If it had greater setbacks and it had, didn't have some of the difficulties. I mean, the first clue too is like when you start looking at your parking, costs and how difficult it is to get all that parking in. That should give you a bit of a clue that you are on a property that's been somewhat overdeveloped. So yeah, granted, you increase the property value, you got all the density you could try and fit on here, and you're trying to work within your as of right, but on the other hand, it doesn't fit within the context, and it certainly doesn't address any kind of future development that would, probably impact the value of the building quite significantly, because any neighboring development, if it took, again, the same approach, that building would have some severe problems with either keeping its vacancy rates low, or it's a rental or it's a condo. But in any event, it would severely impact the value of that building. So I think you need a rethink. And as painful as it is, it sort of will give you an opportunity, I think, by simply looking at reducing the number of suites per floor, pulling in the facade over top of the heritage piece, and taking a really close look. I mean, your studio apartments with balconies projecting over that minimal setback. And if there's a building across the way, it's going to be a real problem. So I think, as everyone said, you've heard it over and over, so I won't repeat myself, but I think it's kind of clear that the massing and the scale of this development has to come down and has to be somewhat reduced in terms of the footprint on the upper floors. There is a lot of attention to the upper body of this building and somewhat less attention to the base. And I think, frankly, I don't think you need the projection in the mid body to the extent that you're doing, and you will have some issues with how to deal with that structurally. In any event, we want to thank you for your presentation. It's an interesting and it shows a great skill level at putting a building together. But we just have some strong issues with the context and the density. So I think if you require us to repeat some of these comments, or you're quite comfortable with what you've heard so far, then maybe we can close this meeting out and go forward from there.
Ali, if you have any further questions, I suggest that you put them to the panel. As far as I'm concerned, I'm fairly comfortable with what's been said thus far. Just as one quick note, Vince, there is a 3-meter easement on the neighboring property to the east. So in any situation where a property where the lands to the east are redeveloped, I'd like to note that I said I did not say will not be redeveloped. I said are unlikely to be redeveloped. But in any event, based on the setback that we're providing here, you'd be looking at a 5.5-meter setback between the two buildings. Now that's only half a meter off what would typically be required above 22 meters in the zoning bylaw. So I hope that provides some credence to that one property line and the context in which it's going to be sitting in relation to that property line. But other than that, I'll leave it to Ali to see if he has any additional questions. I just want to provide that one clarification with regard to the eastern property line.
Thank you.
I'm just going to step in here. We only have 5 minutes left, and we do have an item right after this. So if we could wrap it up as quick as possible. Sorry.
Sure. First of all, thank you for all the comments. We consider all those comments. We take them to team and just review them in detail, and we will be more than happy if we can apply some of them, or we can deal with the comments and the question in our next step. Just one more thing about the sprinkler window, which I mentioned. As you see in the elevations, there are metal panels that become solid, so it's not 100% sprinkler all around the building. So that's I want to just make it clear. So anyway, I think again, thanks again for your time and your good comments, and we consider them and review them in detail.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.